Most histories of the Second World War describe how armies fought, maneuvered, and supplied themselves with weapons and ammunition. But one of the most constant pressures of the war had nothing to do with combat. It was heat, specifically the lack of it. Across multiple fronts, soldiers and civilians often found themselves unable to light fires at all. Smoke revealed positions. Fuel was scarce or non-existent. Entire cities were under bombardment or siege. In some cases, even striking a match could bring death. Under those conditions, the question was not how to cook food efficiently, it was how to make food edible without flame or fuel of any kind. These improvised methods rarely appear in standard histories, yet they reveal more about survival under modern industrial warfare than many battlefield accounts. If you value deep historical analysis of how people actually endured war, subscribe to The Survival Record, because the quiet technologies of survival often shaped outcomes just as much as weapons did. In besieged cities, fermentation replaced cooking altogether. During long urban sieges, the absence of fuel was as dangerous as food shortages themselves. Nowhere was this clearer than in Leningrad, where civilians faced catastrophic winter conditions during the German encirclement. Firewood disappeared early, coal ran out soon after. The ability to boil water or cook grain simply vanished. Fermentation became an essential substitute for heat. Root vegetables, cabbage, and even thin grain pastes were left to ferment in sealed containers or buried pits. Fermentation softened tough plant fibers and inhibited spoilage without requiring heat. It also introduced acidity that suppressed harmful bacteria. This was not culinary tradition, it was biochemical necessity. Fermented foods could be stored longer, digested more easily, and prepared in complete darkness if required. In later decades, military survival doctrine incorporated fermentation as a viable no-fuel preservation method in extreme conditions, particularly in polar and siege simulations. Chemical self-heating rations showed how reactions could replace fire. Several armies experimented with chemical heating systems that required no flame. The Wehrmacht and later Allied forces tested sealed containers containing compounds that generated heat when mixed with water. Though primarily designed to warm food, soldiers sometimes used these reactions to partially cook raw ingredients placed nearby. The principle was simple. Exothermic chemical reactions produced controlled heat without smoke or visible flame. These early experiments directly influenced modern flameless ration heaters used in military field packs today. They demonstrated that heat itself, not combustion, was the essential requirement. That distinction changed how militaries thought about food preparation in stealth environments. Body heat became a reliable cooking environment in extreme cold. On the Eastern Front, soldiers of the Red Army and German forces alike learned to use their own bodies as slow-warming systems. Food wrapped in cloth or sealed in containers could be placed under layers of clothing, especially near the torso. Over several hours, body warmth softened frozen bread, thawed fats, and gradually warmed dense food into an edible state. While this did not produce traditional cooking, it changed texture and digestibility, often the difference between eating and not eating. This method revealed a critical survival insight. Maintaining edible temperature ranges matters more than reaching boiling point. Modern cold environment survival training still emphasizes passive warming techniques that originated in these conditions. Sunlight itself functioned as a distributed cooking system. In desert theaters, direct solar heat could be harnessed without tools. Troops operating with the British Army in North Africa learned to place food in sealed containers exposed to full sunlight, sometimes buried shallowly in sand to trap heat. Temperatures inside containers rose steadily through solar radiation and ground conduction. Grain paste softened, fats melted, and water warmed enough to rehydrate dried rations. Solar exposure required patience and timing rather than fuel. It also left no trace, no smoke, ash, or scent plume detectable by enemy patrols. Later survival manuals formalized solar heating as a viable preparation method in arid environments. Long soaking transformed hard rations without heat. Hard grains, dried legumes, and compressed military rations were designed for longevity, not immediate edibility. Without fuel, soaking became the primary preparation technique. Water alone, given enough time, could soften even extremely dense rations. Soldiers learned to extend soaking periods dramatically, sometimes overnight, sometimes for days, allowing hydration to break down structural rigidity. This method appeared across multiple fronts, including among units of the United States Army operating in remote Pacific environments, where fuel transport was unreliable. The lesson was simple but profound. Time could substitute for heat in many food systems. Underground heat reservoirs acted as natural warming chambers. In some regions, shallow ground retained warmth from daytime solar absorption or geothermal activity. Soldiers and civilians buried food in insulated containers beneath the surface, allowing gradual heat transfer from the surrounding earth. And this was not cooking in the conventional sense, and it was thermal equalization. Frozen or hardened food absorbed ambient ground warmth slowly and evenly. This technique appeared in both rural Europe and parts of Southeast Asia, including areas affected by the Burma campaign, where dense jungle canopy limited open-fire cooking. The earth itself became a thermal buffer. Mechanical processing replaced heat in food preparation. Grinding, crushing, and pounding could achieve many effects normally produced by cooking. Tough plant fibers broke down physically. Starches became more digestible, fats released more readily. The Imperial Japanese Army trained troops to pulverize dried food into a fine paste which required less digestive effort even when eaten cold. Mechanical breakdown, reduced the body's metabolic workload, compensating for the absence of cooking. Modern survival nutrition still emphasizes mechanical processing as a way to maximize energy extraction when fuel is unavailable. Natural enzymatic breakdown made raw food safer to eat. Certain foods, when left to rest after cutting or crushing, undergo enzymatic changes that soften texture and reduce bitterness. Wartime survival guides, particularly those circulated among irregular forces, encouraged controlled resting periods for sliced roots and tubers. Enzymes began breaking down complex molecules almost immediately after cellular damage. Given enough time, raw plant material became more palatable and digestible. This method required no tools beyond a knife and patience. It reflected growing wartime understanding of biological processes that function independently of heat. Insulated containers preserved existing heat long enough to finish cooking. Where partial heating was possible, even briefly insulation could complete the process without additional fuel. Food placed in thick cloth wrappings, sealed crates, or layered bedding retained heat long enough for continued internal cooking. This principle mirrored traditional haybox cooking, but wartime conditions pushed it further. Even minimal warmth could be extended and stabilized. In bombed urban environments, insulation sometimes meant the difference between raw and edible food when fuel supplies were measured in minutes rather than hours. Shared warmth among people became a collective cooking resource. Groups huddled in confined spaces, bunkers, shelters, trenches, generated significant ambient heat. Containers placed within these shared environments gradually warmed over time. This was not intentional cooking at first, it emerged through observation. Food left near sleeping groups softened noticeably after several hours. Communal body heat functioned as a low-grade thermal system. This method demonstrated how social behavior itself could become a survival technology. What these methods reveal about warfare is more important than the methods themselves. These techniques emerged not from innovation for its own sake, but from constraint so severe that combustion itself became impossible. They represent a category of survival knowledge shaped by total war, industrial conflict that disrupted not just supply chains but the basic physical conditions required for daily life. Military doctrine after 1945 increasingly recognized that logistical vulnerability includes fuel dependency for food preparation. Modern survival training, emergency planning, and ration design still reflect lessons first learned in siege cities, frozen front lines, and fuel-starved jungles. Cooking without flame was never simply about food. It was about invisibility, endurance, and adaptation to environments where even heat became a strategic liability. Remembering these overlooked wartime practices matters because they reveal how survival operates when systems collapse completely. They show how human ingenuity shifts from efficiency to mere continuity, and how small physiological and environmental insights can determine whether people endure or fail. If you value deep, grounded historical analysis that uncovers what most war histories leave behind, subscribe to the Survival Record and share this video with others who want to understand how survival really works when history stops providing comforts and starts removing them.